The
Hey
Arizona
kid,
sun
you're
hadn't
safe
yet
now.
broken over the
Help me!
Bradshaw
I've
Mountains
got you.
when
Hold
Rose
on.
Brennan turned the
Thank
key
you.
in the back door of Rosie's Roadhouse Diner. The lock resisted, same as it had for 35 years. Some mornings, Rosie swore that old brass mechanism knew her touch. Other mornings, like this one in late October, it felt like even the door understood she was going through motions instead of living through moments. The hinges groaned, the smell of yesterday's fryer oil and stale coffee wrapped around her like a worn coat. Rosie stepped into the kitchen and let the door swing shut behind her. 5:45 in the morning, right on schedule. She'd been right on schedule for 35 years. The kitchen waited in darkness. Rosie's hand found the light switch without looking. Fluorescent tubes flickered overhead, humming their electric song. Stainless steel counters caught the harsh light. The grill sat cold and waiting. Everything exactly where it should be. Everything exactly where it had been yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. Rosie hung her jacket on the hook by the prep station. The movements were automatic. Muscle memory carved by 3.5 decades of opening this place alone. Not always alone, though. Once there had been Garrett. And before the mining accident took Garrett 15 years ago, there had been Mikey. She stopped at the counter where she kept the register. Next to the cash drawer sat a small framed photograph. The frame was silver tarnished at the edges despite her regular polishing. The photo showed a boy of 8 with a gap-toothed smile and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed. Michael Patrick Brennan, Mikey, her son, dead 20 years this past August. Rosie's fingers touched the glass over Mikey's face. The ritual was the same every morning. Touch the photo, remember the laugh. Feel the hollow space in her chest where a mother's heart was supposed to sit whole and unbroken. Then get to work because the dead stayed dead and the living had bills to pay. The coffee maker gurgled to life. While it brewed, Rosie began her prep work. Eggs from the walk-in, bacon from the cooler, potatoes for hash browns. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. This was the blessing of routine. You could do it without thinking. And when you didn't think, you didn't remember. Except Rosie always remembered. She was 58 years old. She'd opened this diner when she was 23, fresh out of a bad marriage, and determined to make something of herself. Garrett had come along 5 years later. A good man, a copper miner with calloused hands and a quiet laugh. They'd had 10 good years before Mikey got sick, then 3 hard years watching leukemia eat away at their boy, then 2 years of Garrett trying to hold them both together, then the accident at the mine. A cable snapped. Garrett never came home. That was 15 years ago. Rosie had been alone ever since. She cracked eggs into a bowl, 18 of them. The shells made soft, crunching sounds as they broke. Outside, Prescott was beginning to wake. A truck rumbled past on Montezuma Street. Somewhere a dog barked. The world turning like it always did, indifferent to grief, relentless in its insistence that life continued whether you wanted it to or not. Garrett used to say she worked too hard. He'd said it right up until the day the cable snapped and the load came down on him. Just like that. No warning, no goodbye. The same way Mikey had slipped away in that hospital bed, his small hand going limp in hers while machines beeped their useless alerts. Rosie whisked the eggs harder than necessary. The fork scraped against the bowl. Stop it, she told herself. Stop living in the past. But the past was all she had. The past, in this diner, and the endless march of days that all looked exactly the same. By 6:15, the coffee was ready and the grill was heating. Rosie poured herself a cup, black, no sugar. She took it to the front window and looked out at Courthouse Plaza. The old Yavapai County Courthouse sat solid and imposing in the pre-dawn light. A few early risers were already crossing the plaza. Joggers, people walking dogs. Prescott waking up to another ordinary Wednesday. Ordinary. That was the word for Rosie's life now. Ordinary and empty and so predictable she could write the script for the next 20 years without pause. Open the diner, serve the breakfast crowd, clean up, serve lunch, clean up, close. Go upstairs to her apartment, microwave something, watch television without seeing it, go to bed, wake up, do it all again. She finished her coffee. The trash needed to go out before the morning rush. Rosie grabbed the bag from the bin by the prep station and hauled it toward the back door. It wasn't heavy, just the usual debris from yesterday's service. Coffee grounds and napkins and food waste. The detritus of feeding a town that barely noticed the woman doing the feeding. The back door opened onto an alley that ran between Montezuma and Cortez streets. Most people never saw this alley. It was the hidden spine of downtown Prescott, where delivery trucks came and businesses kept their dumpsters, and the unglamorous work of keeping a town running happened out of sight. Rosie had been taking trash to this alley for 35 years. She knew every crack in the pavement, every stain on the brick walls, every sound that belonged and every sound that didn't. This morning there was a sound that didn't belong. Rosie froze with the trash bag in her hand, her ears strained against the ambient noise of the waking town. There it was again, a small sound, soft, almost like a whimper, like an animal in pain. She set the trash bag down and walked toward the dumpster. The sound was coming from inside it. Rosie's heart began to pound. Please not a dog, she thought. Please not some poor creature trapped in suffering. She'd heard stories about raccoons and cats getting stuck in dumpsters. The thought of it made her stomach turn. The dumpster's lid was partially open. Rosie grabbed the edge and lifted it fully. The hinges squealed. Morning light spilled into the interior. And what Rosie saw made the world stop turning. Curled in the corner of the dumpster, nestled among black garbage bags and discarded cardboard boxes, was a child. A boy, small, maybe 8 years old, maybe younger. It was hard to tell because he was folded in on himself like a broken bird. His clothes were filthy, a thin jacket that looked 2 sizes too small, jeans with holes in the knees, and his feet. God, his feet were bare. Bare and dirty and covered in what looked like blisters and dried blood. The boy's eyes opened, blue eyes, impossibly blue. The kind of blue that reminded Rosie of summer skies and swimming pools and everything clean and innocent in the world. Eyes that should have been looking at playgrounds or birthday cakes or a mother's face, not staring out from a pile of garbage with the flat affect of someone who had stopped expecting anything good. Those eyes met Rosie's. And in that instant, 20 years collapsed. The grief she had carefully compartmentalized and buried under routine and stoicism came roaring back. Because those eyes, those blue eyes in that small face, they were Mikey's eyes. Rosie's hand flew to her mouth. A sound escaped her throat. Part gasp, part sob. She stood frozen, staring at this impossible thing. This child in her dumpster. This ghost made flesh. The boy didn't move. He just watched her with those blue eyes, waiting. The way prey waits for a predator to decide whether to strike or move on. There was no hope in his expression, no plea for help, just acceptance. As if being found in a dumpster by a stranger was exactly what he expected from life. But there was something else. Something clutched in his small, dirty hand. A photograph. Torn at the edges, creased and stained. Rosie could just make out the image. A woman, dark hair, smiling. The boy's mother, maybe. Oh, God. Rosie's voice cracked. Oh, sweetheart. Oh, no. She reached toward him. The boy flinched, drew himself tighter into his corner. Rosie pulled her hand back. I'm not going to hurt you. Her voice came out too loud, too sharp. She tried again, softer. I'm not going to hurt you, honey. I promise. My name is Rosie. What's yours? The boy's lips pressed together. He didn't speak, but his eyes never left hers, calculating, weighing risks, deciding whether to trust or run. Rosie looked around the alley as if expecting someone to appear and explain this, as if there was some rational reason for a child to be sleeping in her trash. The alley was empty, just brick walls and pavement and the distant sounds of Prescott waking up. How long had he been here? How many people had walked past this alley? How many had heard something and kept walking? The questions made Rosie's chest tight, with something that felt like anger and shame mixed together. This was her town, her alley, and a child had been sleeping in her garbage while the world went about its business. Are you hungry? Rosie asked. The boy's eyes flickered. Something moved behind that flat expression, a crack in the armor. I bet you are. I bet you're very hungry. Rosie kept her voice low and gentle, the voice she used to use with Mikey when he was scared. I own the diner right here, the one behind me. I can make you breakfast. Anything you want, pancakes. Do you like pancakes? The boy's throat moved as he swallowed. Still, he didn't speak. How about this? Rosie took a step back from the dumpster, put space between them, non-threatening. How about you climb out of there and come inside with me just for a little while? I'll make you some food and we can talk. If you don't like it, you can leave. No tricks, no traps, just breakfast and a warm place to sit. Okay. For a long moment, the boy didn't move. Rosie could see him thinking, calculating risks, weighing trust against hunger. It broke her heart that a child this young had to make such calculations. Then slowly, painfully, the boy began to uncurl. His movements were stiff, like someone who had been in one position too long, or someone whose body hurt. He pushed himself up to his knees, then his feet. Rosie could see him better now. He was thin, not just thin, malnourished. His cheeks were hollow, his wrists like sticks poking out from his jacket sleeves. The photograph was still clutched in one hand. He held it like a lifeline. The boy climbed out of the dumpster with the careful movements of someone navigating pain. When his bare feet hit the pavement, he winced. Rosie saw the blisters up close now, raw and infected. This child had walked far, walked until his feet bled. Come on, sweetie. Rosie gestured toward the back door of the diner. Let's get you inside. The boy took one step, then another. He moved like a feral cat, ready to bolt at any sudden movement. Rosie led him slowly through the back door and into the kitchen. The fluorescent light seemed harsh after the dim alley. The boy squinted against the brightness. Rosie pulled out a stool by the prep counter. Sit down. Take the weight off those feet. The boy climbed onto the stool. He sat with his back straight and his hands folded in his lap. Perfectly still, waiting for whatever came next. The photograph rested on his knee. Rosie wanted to cry. Instead, she went to work. First things first. She grabbed a clean dish towel and ran it under warm water. Then she knelt in front of the stool and gently lifted one of the boy's feet. He tensed but didn't pull away. Rosie cleaned the dirt and dried blood as carefully as she could. The blisters were worse than they looked from a distance. Some had burst, some were infected. This child needed medical attention, but first he needed food and warmth and someone to see him as a person instead of a problem. There, Rosie finished cleaning his feet and stood up. That must feel a little better. The boy looked at his cleaned feet. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, as if kindness was so foreign he didn't know how to process it. Rosie moved to the grill. Her hands were shaking, but she kept them busy. Pancake batter from the cooler, a ladle to pour. The grill hissed as the batter hit the hot surface. The smell of cooking filled the kitchen. Comfort food. The universal language of care. What's your name, honey? Rosie asked as she worked. For a long moment, silence. Then a voice so quiet she almost missed it. Ethan. Rosie's hands stilled over the grill. The boy had a name. Ethan. Ethan, that's a good name, a strong name. She flipped the pancakes. How old are you, Ethan? Another pause. 8. 8. The same age Mikey had been. The same age as the boy in the photo on her counter. Rosie blinked hard against the tears threatening to spill. 8 is a good age, she said, keeping her voice steady. I had a son who was 8 once, long time ago. She piled the pancakes on a plate, added butter, syrup, set it in front of Ethan along with a fork and a glass of orange juice. The boy stared at the food like it might disappear if he looked away. Go ahead, Rosie said gently. Eat. Ethan picked up the fork. His hand trembled. He cut a piece of pancake and lifted it to his mouth. For a second, he just held it there. Then he bit down. His eyes closed, and Rosie watched something break in him. The wall he'd built to survive, the armor that kept him from feeling. It cracked, just a little, just enough. He ate like someone who hadn't seen food in days, probably because he hadn't. Rosie stood back and let him. She didn't ask questions, didn't push, just let this broken child fill his empty stomach in peace. When the plate was clean, Ethan looked up at her. His eyes were wet. Thank you, he whispered. You're welcome, sweetheart. Rosie's throat was tight. You want more? Ethan shook his head. His stomach probably couldn't handle more. Not yet. Okay, how about we get you cleaned up a little, maybe find you some better clothes? Before Ethan could answer, the sound of motorcycle engines filled the alley, deep rumbling thunder that shook the windows. Not one bike, not two, dozens. The sound grew louder, closer, until it seemed to surround the building. Rosie's head turned toward the back door. She knew that sound, knew it well. The engines cut off one by one. The sudden silence was almost as loud as the noise had been. Rosie heard boots on pavement, voices calling to each other. Then a knock on the back door. 3 sharp raps. "Rosie!" A man's voice, rough but familiar. "Everything all right in there?" Rosie looked at Ethan. The boy had gone rigid on his stool, fear bright in his eyes. "It's okay," Rosie said quickly. "That's Duke. He's a friend, a good friend. He won't hurt you." She opened the back door. Standing in the alley was Duke McGraw, all 6'3" of him, leather vest over a worn denim shirt, gray beard reaching his chest, tattoos covering both arms in intricate designs that told stories Rosie only half understood. A scar ran down the left side of his face from temple to jaw, a souvenir from the copper mine, same place that had killed Garrett. Behind Duke, filling the alley like a leather-clad army, were 74 more men and women wearing the same vest, the same patches. Iron Ravens Motorcycle Club, Prescott Chapter. Duke's weathered face creased with concern. "We were riding through, saw your lights on early, thought maybe something was wrong." His eyes moved past Rosie into the kitchen, landed on Ethan sitting on the stool. Duke's expression changed instantly. The casual concern hardened into something fierce and protective. "Jesus Christ, Rosie. Is that a kid?" "Yes." Rosie stepped aside so Duke could see better. "I found him in my dumpster." Duke stepped into the kitchen. His boots were heavy on the tile. Behind him, Hank Dalton and Carson Holloway followed. The rest of the club stayed in the alley, engines silent, waiting. Hank was Duke's age, 59. Graying hair pulled back in a ponytail, a scar across his throat from a bar fight 20 years ago. He'd been Garrett's friend too, had worked the same shift at the mine, had been there when the cable snapped. Carson was younger, 32. The kid of the group, blonde hair, easy smile. The smile was gone now. His face was grim as he looked at Ethan. Duke moved slowly toward the boy. He was a big man, intimidating to most people, but he moved with the careful precision of someone who understood how threatening he could appear. He stopped a few feet from the stool and lowered himself to one knee, putting his eyes level with Ethan's. "Hey there!" Duke's voice came out surprisingly gentle, a low rumble that somehow managed to sound safe. "My name's Duke. What's yours?" Ethan looked at Rosie. She nodded encouragement. "Ethan," the boy said, so quiet Duke had to lean in to hear. "Ethan, good to meet you." Duke didn't reach out to shake hands, didn't crowd the boy's space. "Rosie here is a friend of mine, has been for about 25 years. She's good people. Best person I know, actually. You're safe with her. You're safe with all of us. I promise you that." Ethan's eyes darted to the other bikers visible through the open door. 74 of them, all leather and denim and chrome, all watching. The boy's small frame seemed to shrink. "I know we look scary," Duke continued. "People cross the street when they see us coming. But here's the thing, Ethan. We take care of our own, and Rosie's our own, which means anyone Rosie cares about, we care about. You understand?" Ethan's blue eyes searched Duke's face, looking for the lie, the threat, the catch, but Duke just waited, patient, open, honest. "Where are your parents, son?" Duke asked gently. Ethan's face closed off, his lips pressed into a thin line. Rosie stepped forward. "Ethan, honey, we need to know. Where's your mama, your daddy?" For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then his voice came out broken and small. "My mom died last month." The words hit the kitchen like physical things. Rosie felt them in her chest, felt them in the hollow place where Mikey used to live. "And your father?" Duke asked, his voice even softer now. "Never met him. Any other family, grandparents, aunts or uncles?" Ethan shook his head. "Mom said it was just us two." Rosie's hand went to her mouth. This child, this boy with Mikey's eyes, he'd been alone for a month, alone and walking and sleeping in garbage, while the world went about its business. Duke stood up slowly. He turned to look at Rosie, Something passed between them, an understanding built on 25 years of friendship. Duke had been there when Garrett died, had helped Rosie keep the diner running when she wanted to give up, had checked on her every week for a year after making sure she ate, making sure she kept going. He knew what she'd lost, and he could see in her face what she was thinking now. "What happened after your mom died, Ethan?" Rosie knelt beside the stool. "Where have you been staying?" "Nowhere, everywhere." Ethan's voice was barely audible. "The lady at our apartment said I had to leave, said she was going to call someone. So I left." "You've been on the streets for a month." Hank's voice cracked with anger. Not at Ethan, at the world. "I walked mostly. At night, hid during the day. People don't like kids alone. They ask questions, try to help. But help means they take you away." Ethan looked at Rosie with those devastating blue eyes. "I don't want to go to a home where they don't want me. I heard my mom talk about those places. Kids get moved around. Nobody really cares." Rosie felt something break open in her chest, something that had been locked shut for 20 years. This child, this brave, broken child, had chosen sleeping in garbage over trusting the system meant to protect him. "How far did you walk, Ethan?" Duke asked. "From Phoenix." The room went silent. Phoenix to Prescott was over 100 miles. Through high desert, through October nights that dropped below freezing. This 8-year-old boy had walked 100 miles. Duke turned to face the open door. The rest of the club stood in the alley, their faces visible through the doorway. 74 people who looked like society's nightmares, who wore their outsider status like armor, who'd been judged and dismissed their entire lives for how they looked instead of who they were. "How many people walked past this alley in the last month?" Duke's voice carried through the kitchen and out to the club. "How many heard something and kept walking? How many told themselves it wasn't their problem?" Nobody answered. They all knew the truth. Duke turned back to Ethan, then to Rosie, then to his club. "This boy has been sleeping in garbage while Prescott went about its business. He's 8 years old. 8. And he chose a dumpster over the safety net this country supposedly provides for children." Hank stepped forward. His scarred face was set in grim lines. "What are you thinking, Duke?" Duke looked at Rosie, really looked at her. And Rosie knew what he was asking without words. "Are you sure? Are you ready? Can you do this?" Rosie looked at Ethan, at his blue eyes and hollow cheeks and blistered feet, at the way he sat perfectly still, waiting for the adults to decide his fate, the way Mikey used to sit in that hospital bed. So brave and so small, waiting for Rosie to tell him everything would be okay, even when they both knew it wouldn't. And Rosie made a decision. The first real decision she'd made in 20 years that wasn't about maintaining routine or managing grief. A decision that came from somewhere deep and primal and fiercely maternal. She stood up, faced Duke, faced the club members visible in the doorway, faced Ethan, and said the words that would change everything. "This boy is staying with me." The kitchen went still. Duke raised an eyebrow. "Rosie, I have a spare room." Her voice gained strength as she spoke. "I have time. I have a business. I have—" She paused, swallowed. "I have love to give. I lost my son 20 years ago. I've been half dead ever since. But this boy," she gestured to Ethan, "this brave, strong boy who walked 100 miles because he was too scared to trust anyone. He needs someone. And maybe I need him too." Duke studied her face. "You know what you're asking for. The legal fight this will be." "I know. You can't just take him, Rosie. There are laws, procedures, child protective services. Then we follow the procedures. We fight the fight. But Ethan is not going back into that dumpster. He's not going to some group home where he's just a number. He's staying with me." Rosie's eyes blazed with something that had been missing for 2 decades. Purpose. "You boys helped me when Garrett died. Helped me keep this diner running when I wanted to give up. Now I need you to help me save this child." Hank looked at Duke. Duke looked at the club members in the doorway. Something passed between them. A decision made without words. The way family decides things. "We're with you, Rosie," Duke said. "Every one of us. Ethan here just got himself 75 bodyguards." Rosie felt tears streaming down her face. She didn't wipe them away. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Duke pulled out his phone. We need to do this right, legal, or they'll take him anyway. Ethan had been watching this entire exchange with wide eyes. Now he spoke up, his voice small but clear. You really want me to stay? Rosie knelt beside his stool again. She took his small, dirty hand in hers, the hand still clutching his mother's photograph. I really do, sweetheart. If you'll have me. Why? Ethan asked. The question children ask when they have learned the world doesn't give anything for free. You don't even know me. Because when I opened that dumpster and saw you there, I saw my son, not replacing him, never replacing him, but honoring what he taught me, which is that every child deserves to be loved, to be safe, to be seen as precious. Rosie squeezed his hand, and maybe because God's giving me a second chance, a chance to get it right this time. Ethan's lower lip trembled. What if I'm bad at being a kid? What if I mess up? Oh, honey. Rosie pulled him into a hug. He was stiff at first, uncertain. Then slowly his thin arms wrapped around her neck, and he buried his face in her shoulder. You could never mess this up, never. Behind them, Duke was on his phone. Rosie heard him speaking in low tones, making calls, setting things in motion. The club members in the alley had moved closer, forming a protective semicircle around the back door. Hank had disappeared somewhere. Carson was texting furiously on his phone. Ethan pulled back from the hug. His face was wet with tears, but something in his expression had changed. The flat acceptance was gone. In its place was something fragile and new. Hope. Can I stay here today, he asked. Just today. You can stay as long as you need to, Rosie said. We'll figure out the rest. Duke ended his call and turned to face them. I've got a lawyer friend, Wyatt Thornton. He specializes in family law. He's getting in his car right now. Should be here in 2 hours. That fast? Rosie asked. I told him it was an emergency. He owes me a favor. Duke crouched beside Ethan again. Ethan, we need to ask you some questions about your mom, about where you've been. It might be hard to talk about, but we need to know everything so we can help you. Can you do that? Ethan looked at Rosie. She nodded encouragement. I'll be right here, she promised. Okay, Ethan said quietly. For the next hour, they pieced together Ethan's story. His mother had been sick for months. Some kind of cancer, no insurance, no family support. She'd held on as long as she could, working double shifts at a convenience store to keep their apartment. But the cancer won. It always did. Ethan had been with her when she died, in their apartment, alone, because they couldn't afford a hospital. The apartment manager had found them 3 days later when neighbors complained about the smell. She'd called the authorities. But in the chaos, Ethan had slipped away. He'd heard his mother talk about foster care, about the group homes where kids were shuffled from place to place, about how nobody really cared once you were in the system. So he ran. He'd walked, hitched a few rides in the backs of trucks when he could, ate from dumpsters, slept in doorways and under bridges, and finally in Rosie's trash bin behind the Roadhouse Diner. He'd been there 3 nights before Rosie found him. 3 nights while Prescott slept and woke and went about its business. By the time Ethan finished his story, there were hardened bikers wiping their eyes in the alley. Hank had returned with clothes from the thrift store on Cortez Street. Carson had called his sister, who worked at the urgent care clinic. Duke was making more phone calls. And Rosie was holding Ethan's hand like she'd never let go. A car pulled up in the alley just after 9, a black Ford F-150. The driver's door opened, and a man in his late 50s stepped out. He was tall, lean, with silver hair cut military short. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt. He carried a leather briefcase and moved with the confidence of someone who knew his way around courtrooms. Duke met him at the door. Wyatt, thanks for coming. You said it was a child in crisis. Wyatt Thornton looked past Duke into the kitchen. His eyes landed on Ethan. His professional mask slipped for just a second, revealing genuine concern. Is that him? That's Ethan Cole, 8 years old, mother deceased, no other family, been living on the streets for a month. Wyatt set his briefcase on the prep counter and knelt in front of Ethan. Hello, Ethan. My name is Wyatt Thornton. I'm a lawyer. Do you know what that means? Ethan shook his head. It means I help people navigate the legal system, the laws and rules that govern how we live. And right now, you need someone to help you navigate those rules. Would it be all right if I asked you some questions? I already told them everything, Ethan said quietly. I know, and I'm going to need to hear it again. I know it's hard, but the more information I have, the better I can help you. Okay, okay. Ethan looked at Rosie. She squeezed his hand. It's okay, sweetie. For the next 30 minutes, Wyatt questioned Ethan with gentle professionalism. He took notes, asked for details, clarified timeline. Then he turned to Rosie. Ms. Brennan, I understand you want to take custody of Ethan. I do, whatever it takes. Wyatt's expression was sympathetic but realistic. You should know what you're up against. You're a single woman, 58 years old, with no recent child-rearing experience. The courts are going to scrutinize everything. Your finances, your living situation, your mental health history. I own this diner free and clear. I own the building. I have an apartment upstairs with 2 bedrooms. I'm financially stable, mentally sound, and I have, Rosie gestured to the bikers filling her kitchen and alley. Support. Wyatt looked at Duke and the club members. A slight smile crossed his face. Unconventional support, but support nonetheless. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a legal pad. Here's what's going to happen. The state requires any child without a legal guardian to be placed in protective custody. That means Child Protective Services will be involved. They'll want to do a home study, background checks, interviews, the works. How long does that take? Rosie asked. Normally months, maybe a year. But in the meantime, Ethan would go into foster care or a group home. No, Rosie's voice was firm. That's not happening. Then we need to move fast. Get ahead of this. Wyatt was already writing. I can file for emergency temporary custody, argue that Ethan has established a relationship with you and removing him would cause additional trauma. But we need CPS to agree, and they won't unless we can prove you can provide adequate care. Duke stepped forward. What does adequate care look like? Safe home, stable income, character references, medical care for Ethan, school enrollment plans, proof of support system. Wyatt looked up from his notes. Can you provide all that? Yes, Rosie said without hesitation. Hank pulled out his phone. I'll start calling people for character references. Rosie's been feeding this town for 35 years. Half of Prescott owes her something. Carson was already texting. My sister can see Ethan today. Full medical exam. Duke nodded. We'll handle the rest, whatever she needs. Wyatt closed his notebook. Then here's the plan. I filed for emergency custody this morning. But before that happens, CPS needs to be notified. They'll send a caseworker to assess the situation. Everything depends on that assessment. As if on cue, the sound of a police siren echoed from Montezuma Street. It grew louder, closer, then cut off abruptly in the alley. Car doors opened and closed. Footsteps approached the back door. A knock, then a familiar voice. Rosie, it's Officer Dawson. Got a call about a situation here. Rosie's heart sank. Someone had called the police. Of course they had. 75 motorcycles parked in an alley would draw attention. Duke opened the door. Officer Michael Dawson stood in the threshold. He was 35, still young enough to remember working as a busboy in this very diner 15 years ago. Still young enough to remember Rosie's kindness when he was trying to work his way through community college. Mike looked past Duke into the kitchen, took in the scene. 75 bikers, one small boy, one determined woman. His expression shifted through confusion to understanding to concern. Someone called about a disturbance, Mike said. But this doesn't look like a disturbance. It's not, Rosie said. It's a rescue. Mike stepped into the kitchen. He looked at Ethan, at the boy's cleaned feet and hollow cheeks and 2 small clothes. His cop's eyes saw everything. The story was written on Ethan's body. What's your name, son? Mike asked gently. Ethan. Where are your parents, Ethan? Mom's dead. Never had a dad. Mike's jaw tightened. He turned to Rosie. How long has he been here? I found him in my dumpster this morning. He's been on the streets for a month, since his mother died. Jesus. Mike ran a hand through his hair. Rosie, you know I have to call CPS. It's protocol. I know. Rosie stood up, faced him directly. But Mike, before you make that call, you need to know something. I'm not letting this boy go into the system. I'm taking custody, Legal custody. We've already got a lawyer. We're filing emergency papers. Ethan is staying with me. Mike looked at her like he'd never seen her before. The quiet, grief-stricken woman who'd served him coffee for 15 years was gone. In her place stood someone fierce. Someone with fire in her eyes. Rosie, it's not that simple. There are procedures, background checks, home studies. CPS has to approve any placement. Then they'll approve this one. Rosie didn't back down. Mike, you knew Mikey. You knew my son. You came to his funeral. You've seen what his death did to me. Well, I'm done being half alive. I'm done going through the motions. This boy needs someone, and I need to be that someone. So yes, call CPS. Follow your procedures. But I'm telling you right now, Ethan is not spending another night anywhere but with me. Mike looked at Duke. You're backing her on this with everything we've got, Duke said. Ethan's one of ours now. All 75 of us are invested in making this work. Mike shook his head, not in disagreement, in something like awe. You people are crazy. Maybe, Hank said from the doorway. Why, but we're crazy enough to care. Where was everyone else when this kid was sleeping in garbage? Mike didn't have an answer for that. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling CPS, like I said, protocol. But he looked at Rosie. I'm also going to recommend they approve emergency temporary placement with you. On the record. Thank you, Mike. Mike made the call, spoke in official tones about a minor child without guardians, a potential placement, a request for immediate assessment. When he hung up, he looked at Wyatt. They're sending a caseworker, Beth Marlowe. She'll be here within the hour. You've got that long to make your case. The next hour was controlled chaos. Hank came back with more clothes for Ethan. Food from the grocery store. Carson's sister arrived and examined Ethan in the back office, documenting his injuries and malnutrition. Wyatt prepped Rosie on what to say and what not to say. Duke coordinated the club members, getting them to call in the character references. Line up community support. Ethan stayed close to Rosie through all of it. Every time she moved, his eyes tracked her, as if he was afraid she'd disappear if he looked away. Rosie understood. He'd lost everyone. Trust was the hardest thing in the world for him now. At 10:30, a white sedan pulled into the alley. The driver was a woman in her late 30s with kind eyes and tired shoulders. She carried a tablet and wore a county ID badge. Beth Marlowe, CPS caseworker. Beth took in the scene with professional assessment. 75 bikers, one diner owner, one small boy. She'd seen stranger things in her career, but not many. I'm Beth Marlowe with Child Protective Services. She addressed the room at large. I understand there's a minor child here who needs placement. That would be Ethan, Wyatt stepped forward with his lawyer voice. And before we go any further, you should know I'm filing for emergency temporary custody on behalf of Rose Brennan. We have medical records documenting Ethan's condition, character witnesses ready to testify, and a comprehensive care plan. Beth's eyebrows rose. You work fast. When a child's welfare is at stake, yes. Beth looked at Ethan. Her professional demeanor softened. Hi, Ethan. My name is Beth. Can we talk for a minute, just you and me? Ethan looked at Rosie. She nodded. It's okay, sweetie. Tell her the truth. Beth and Ethan moved to a corner of the kitchen, spoke in low tones for several minutes. Rosie couldn't hear what they were saying, could only watch Ethan's body language. The way he kept glancing back at her, the way he nodded or shook his head at Beth's questions. When they finished, Beth returned to Rosie. Her expression was unreadable. Ms. Brennan, Ethan tells me you found him this morning. Fed him, cleaned his injuries, called in medical help and legal representation, all within 4 hours. That's impressive and concerning. Concerning how, Rosie asked, it's unusual for someone to become this invested this quickly in a child they just met. Beth's tone wasn't accusatory, just careful. I need to understand your motivation. Why are you doing this? Rosie took a breath. Here it was, the moment of truth. I had a son, Mikey. He died at 20 years ago. Leukemia. He was 8, same age as Ethan. Rosie's voice stayed steady. I've been not really living since then, going through motions, running this diner because it's what I know. But when I found Ethan in that dumpster this morning, something woke up in me, something I thought was dead. And I realized maybe this is why I survived Mikey's death. Maybe God kept me here for this, to save this boy. Beth wrote something on her tablet. Ms. Brennan, I have to ask, are you trying to replace your deceased son with Ethan? The question hung in the air. Rosie knew it was coming, knew it was the obvious concern. She chose her words carefully. No, Ethan isn't Mikey. He's his own person with his own story. But maybe I can love them both. Maybe there's room in a mother's heart for more than one child, even if one of them is gone. Rosie's eyes filled with tears. I'm not trying to replace my son. I'm trying to honor what he taught me, which is that life is precious, that love matters, that we show up for each other when it counts. Beth studied her face for a long moment. Then she turned to Ethan. Ethan, did you want to stay with Ms. Brennan? Yes, Ethan said immediately. She's nice. She gave me food. She didn't yell or grab me. She just helped. Beth looked at Duke and the assembled bikers. And all of you, you're supporting this arrangement. Every single one of us, Duke said. Rosie's family, Ethan's family, now too. We take care of family. Beth typed more notes. When she looked up, her expression was conflicted. Here's the situation. Normally, I'd have to place Ethan in emergency foster care pending a full investigation. That's protocol. She paused. But there's a provision that allows for kinship placement in certain circumstances. If I can establish that Ethan has a meaningful relationship with you and that removing him would cause additional trauma. He's known her 4 hours, Wyatt said. How can that qualify as meaningful? Sometimes 4 hours is enough. Beth looked at Ethan, at the way he stood close to Rosie, the way his small hand had found hers. I've seen cases where blood relatives showed less care than what I'm seeing here, and Ethan's already been through tremendous trauma. Removing him from the first stable environment he's found, she trailed off. So what are you saying? Rosie asked, afraid to hope. I'm saying I'm going to recommend emergency temporary placement with you, pending a full home study and approval from my supervisor. Beth pulled out her phone. But Ms. Brennan, you need to understand this is highly conditional. Any sign that Ethan isn't thriving, any indication of instability, and he'll be removed immediately. You'll have surprise visits, mandatory therapy sessions, background checks, the works. And at the end of all that, a judge will decide if this placement becomes permanent. That could take months, maybe a year. I understand, Rosie said. Whatever it takes. Beth nodded. Then I'll make the recommendation. But her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her expression changed. My supervisor wants to talk to me now. Give me a minute. She stepped outside to take the call. Through the window, Rosie could see her pacing, gesturing, speaking urgently. The conversation went on for several minutes. Finally, Beth came back inside, and her face told Rosie everything. My supervisor is Sharon Whitmore. She's not supportive of this placement. She wants Ethan in official foster care immediately, pending full investigation. Why? Wyatt demanded. She thinks this situation is too irregular, too fast, too emotionally driven. She's worried about Ms. Brennan's mental state, the grief, the attachment to a child who looks like her deceased son. She sees red flags. Red flags, Rosie's voice rose. I gave him food and safety. What's the red flag in that? The speed of your emotional investment, the unconventional support system. Beth gestured to the bikers. No offense to anyone here, but a motorcycle club isn't typically considered an appropriate support network for raising a child. Duke stepped forward. With all due respect to your supervisor, we've raised millions of dollars for children's hospitals. We do toy runs for underprivileged kids every Christmas. We've built playgrounds and renovated youth centers. We're not criminals. We're citizens who happen to ride motorcycles. I know that. I've seen your community work. But my supervisor, she's by the book. And the book says this situation is irregular. Beth looked genuinely sorry. I'm recommending Ethan be placed in emergency foster care tonight. You can fight it in court, but for now, that's how it has to be. No. The word came from Ethan, small but fierce. Everyone turned to look at him. I'm not going. You can't make me. I'll run away again. Ethan, honey, Beth started. I mean it. Ethan's blue eyes blazed. I survived a month on the streets. I can do it again. I won't go to some home where nobody wants me. I'd rather sleep in the dumpster. Ethan, nobody's going to make you sleep in a dumpster, Beth said gently. Then let me stay with Miss Rosie. Rosie knelt beside him. Ethan, listen to me. If you run, they'll just find you and things will be worse. We have to play by their rules, just for now. Just until we can prove to them that you belong with me. But what if they never let me come back? Ethan's voice broke. What if I go to that foster home and they keep me there? Then I'll fight. Rosie took his hands. I'll fight every single day until I get you back. I promise you, I'm not giving up on you. You promise. I promise, on my son's memory. I promise. What I used to. Wyatt's phone rang. He answered it, listened. Then his eyes widened. Hold on. He put the call on speaker. Say that again. A woman's voice came through the speaker. Professional, crisp. This is Judge Sterling Mackenzie's clerk. The judge has been made aware of the Ethan Cole situation. He's ordering an emergency hearing for 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. All parties are to appear. The child is to remain in current placement pending the hearing. Beth's face went pale. Judge Mackenzie is intervening. How does he even know about this? Let's just say the judge has friends in the motorcycle community, Duke said with a slight smile. You called in a favor from a district judge. Beth looked between Duke and Wyatt. I made a phone call to someone who made a phone call, Duke said. When the judge heard about a kid sleeping in dumpsters while the system moved at bureaucratic speed, he decided to expedite things. Beth ran a hand through her hair. This is completely irregular. My supervisor is going to lose her mind. Your supervisor can take it up with a judge tomorrow, Wyatt said smoothly. Until then, the court has spoken. Ethan stays with Rosie. Beth looked at Ethan, then at Rosie, then at the room full of bikers who clearly weren't going anywhere. She made a decision. Fine, Ethan remains here tonight under my supervision. I'll stay and do a preliminary home assessment. But tomorrow at that hearing, you better have everything in order. Because if Judge Mackenzie sides with CPN, Ethan goes into foster placement immediately. Understood. Understood, Rosie said. Beth looked at her tablet, then at the chaos of the diner kitchen. 75 bikers, one determined woman, one scared child. The whole situation was irregular, unusual, unprecedented. But sometimes Beth thought the irregular was exactly what was needed. All right, she said. Show me this apartment where Ethan will supposedly be living. Rosie led Beth upstairs. Wyatt made more calls. Duke coordinated the club. Ethan stayed close to Rosie, his small hand gripping hers. Hank and Carson followed, carrying the clothes and supplies they'd gathered. The apartment above the diner was modest, clean, a living room with worn furniture, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, one bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. Beth inspected everything with professional thoroughness, checked the smoke detectors, the locks on the windows, the cleanliness of the bathroom. Then she opened the door to the 2nd bedroom and stopped. The room was frozen in time. A child's room, baseball trophies on shelves, model airplanes hanging from the ceiling, a bed with a quilt featuring cartoon characters, posters of long-retired athletes, everything covered in a fine layer of dust. This was Mikey's room, Rosie said quietly. I haven't changed anything since he died. Beth turned to look at her. In 20 years, I couldn't. It felt like erasing him. And you're willing to change it now for Ethan? Rosie looked at the room, at the shrine to her grief, at the physical manifestation of her inability to move forward. Then she looked at Ethan standing in the doorway with those blue eyes. So like Mikey's and yet entirely his own. Yes, Rosie said. Mikey would want someone to use his room. He was generous like that, always sharing his toys, his space, his love. She walked to the shelf and picked up a baseball glove, leather cracked with age. He'd want Ethan to have this, to have all of it. Ethan stepped into the room hesitantly. This was your son's room. Yes, and now if you want it, it's yours. I don't want to take his things. You're not taking them, sweetheart. I'm giving them to you. There's a difference, Wadiam. Hank and Carson were already moving, taking down dusty posters, opening windows to let fresh air in. Beth watched them work, watched Rosie hand Ethan the baseball glove, watched the boy hold it carefully, reverently, like the precious gift it was. "You have until tomorrow morning to make this room appropriate for an 8-year-old boy," Beth said. "New bedding, age-appropriate decorations. I'll need to see school enrollment plans, medical care arrangements, a daily schedule." "You'll have everything," Rosie promised. Beth made notes on her tablet, took photos, asked questions about Rosie's work schedule, her finances, her support system. Through it all, Ethan stayed close, watching everything with those careful eyes. When the assessment was done, Beth stood in the living room and looked at Rosie. "Off the record, I want this to work. I do. Ethan clearly feels safe with you, and God knows the foster system is overburdened. But my supervisor is going to fight this. She sees you as an unstable, grief-stricken woman using a vulnerable child to fill a hole in your life. You're going to have to prove her wrong." "I will," Rosie said, "whatever it takes." Beth left with promises to return in the morning before the hearing. As soon as she was gone, the club went into action. Hank and Carson painted Ethan's room, a soft blue, sky blue, hope blue. Duke made calls, pulling together character references from business owners and community members. Wyatt prepped legal documents, and Rosie took Ethan shopping for new clothes, new sheets, new things that were his and his alone. By the time the sun set over the Bradshaw Mountains, Ethan had a room. Not Mikey's room, Ethan's room. With new blue sheets and posters Ethan had picked out himself. With clothes that fit in the dresser. With that baseball glove on the nightstand. A bridge between past and present. Rosie made dinner, real dinner, not diner food, home cooking, spaghetti and meatballs, because Ethan said it was his favorite. They ate at the small kitchen table, just the two of them, while downstairs the club cleaned the diner and made plans. After dinner, Rosie ran Ethan a bath, his first real bath in who knows how long. She gave him privacy, but stood outside the door in case he needed her. When he emerged in clean pajamas with his wet hair combed back, Rosie's breath caught. He looked so young, so small, so impossibly precious. "Ready for bed?" she asked. Ethan nodded. They walked to his new room. Rosie pulled back the covers and Ethan climbed in. She tucked the blankets around him. The way she used to tuck Mikey in, the muscle memory was still there after 20 years. "Miss Rosie," Ethan's voice was quiet in the darkened room. "Yes, sweetheart." "What happens tomorrow at the court thing?" Rosie sat on the edge of the bed. "Tomorrow we go in front of a judge. He'll listen to everyone, to the social worker, to the lawyer, to me, and then he'll decide if you can stay here while we work out all the legal stuff. What if he says no? Then we appeal. We fight. We do whatever we have to do. But Ethan, I want you to know something." Rosie took his hand. "Even if they make you go somewhere else for a little while, I'm not giving up. Do you understand this isn't temporary for me? This isn't charity. You're not a project. You're—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You're a gift, a second chance. And I don't waste second chances." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "Nobody ever wanted me to stay before." "Well, I do. I very much do." Even though I'm not Mikey, the question pierced Rosie's heart. "You're not Mikey, and I'm not trying to make you into Mikey. You're Ethan. You're your own person with your own story. But maybe my heart is big enough for both of you. Maybe I can love the son I lost and the son I found, both at the same time." "Is that what I am?" Ethan whispered. "The son you found." Rosie felt tears streaming down her face. "If you want to be." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said in a voice so small and hopeful it broke Rosie's heart, "I want to be." Rosie leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Then that's what you are. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day." She stood to leave, but Ethan's hand caught hers. "Can you stay just until I fall asleep?" Of course. Rosie sat in the chair beside the bed, the same chair she used to sit in when Mikey was sick, when she'd watch him sleep and pray for miracles that never came. But tonight felt different. Tonight she wasn't watching death approach. She was watching life begin again. Ethan's breathing evened out, his small hand relaxed in hers, and Rosie sat in the dark, keeping vigil over this child who'd walked 100 miles to survive, this boy who had chosen her. The second chance she never thought she'd get. Downstairs, she could hear the low murmur of voices. The club still there, still watching, still ready to fight for her, for Ethan. It had been so long since Rosie felt like she belonged to something bigger than grief. So long since she felt purpose beyond survival. Tomorrow they'd face a judge, face a system that didn't move fast or take chances, face people who would question her motives and her ability and her mental state. But tonight in this room with this sleeping child, Rosie felt something she hadn't felt in 20 years. She felt like a mother again, and she'd be damned if anyone took that away from her. Morning came too fast and not fast enough. Rosie woke at 4, her body refusing to pretend it could sleep when everything depended on the next few hours. She lay in the darkness of her bedroom, listening to the silence of the apartment. No, not complete silence. From the room next door came the soft sound of Ethan's breathing. Steady, safe. Here. For now, she rose and dressed in the dark. Not her usual diner uniform of jeans and an apron. Today she wore the black dress she kept for funerals. The one she'd worn to Garrett's service 15 years ago. To Mikey's service before that. Today she was burying her old life. The half-life she'd been living. Today, she was fighting for a new one. She checked on Ethan before heading downstairs. He was still asleep, curled on his side with one hand tucked under his cheek. The baseball glove sat on the nightstand where he'd placed it before bed. Mikey's glove. Ethan's now, a bridge between grief and hope. The diner kitchen was already lit when Rosie descended the stairs. Duke sat at the prep counter with a cup of coffee and a laptop. He looked up when she entered. Couldn't sleep either. His voice was rough with exhaustion. Too much at stake. Rosie poured herself coffee. Duke had been here all night, she realized. Working, preparing, being the friend Garrett had asked him to be 25 years ago. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Compiling everything for Wyatt. Character references, financial records, background checks. We've got 89 letters of support already, everyone from the mayor to the pastor at First Baptist to the guy who delivers your produce. 89 people." Rosie felt something catch in her throat. "I had no idea." "You've been feeding this town for 35 years, Rosie. People remember kindness, especially the quiet kind that doesn't ask for anything back." Duke closed the laptop. "How's Ethan?" "Still sleeping. First real sleep he's had in probably a month." Duke nodded. They sat in silence for a moment, drinking coffee in the pre-dawn darkness. Then Duke spoke again. "Rosie, what if this doesn't work? What if the judge says no? Then we appeal. Fight harder." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "But Duke, you need to prepare yourself. Even if today goes well, this is just the beginning. The scrutiny I'm going to face. The questions, the doubt. People are going to say things, ugly things about me, about my grief, about whether I'm stable enough for this." "I know." Duke reached across the counter and squeezed her hand. "But I also know that for the first time in 20 years, you woke up with a reason to get out of bed. A reason beyond habit and obligation. Ethan needs you, and God help me, I think you need him too." "I do," Rosie admitted. "Is that selfish?" "No, that's human." By 6, the apartment was organized chaos. Hank arrived with paint for last-minute touch-ups. Carson brought breakfast burritos and orange juice. Wyatt showed up with a briefcase full of documents and a game plan. And one by one, members of the club filtered in until the diner was full of people united in a single purpose. Ethan woke to the sound of voices and activity. Rosie found him standing in his doorway, looking overwhelmed by the commotion. "Morning, sweetheart." She knelt to his level. "I know it's loud, but everyone here is helping. Helping us. That okay?" Ethan nodded, his hair stuck up in the back. Sleep had left creases on his face. He looked so young, so vulnerable. Rosie wanted to wrap him up and hide him from everything coming. "Let's get you fed and dressed. We have to be at the courthouse at 9. Ethan's face went pale. "I have to go." "Yes, honey, the judge will want to talk to you, but I'll be right there. And Wyatt? And Duke, you're not alone in this." They ate breakfast together in a quiet corner while the club worked around them. Ethan picked at his food. Anxiety had stolen his appetite. Rosie didn't push. She remembered this feeling, the sick dread of waiting for adults to decide your fate. At 7:30, Beth Marlowe arrived to do her final assessment before the hearing. She walked through the apartment with fresh eyes, noting every change. Ethan's room was transformed. fresh paint, new curtains, toys on the shelves mixed with Mikey's old treasures. A space that honored the past while making room for the present. "You've done good work here," Beth said to Rosie. "The room looks appropriate, welcoming." "Thank you." Beth knelt beside Ethan. "How did you sleep last night?" "Good." Ethan's voice was quiet. "Miss Rosie stayed until I fell asleep." "And do you still want to stay here with Miss Rosie?" "Yes, even if it means following rules, going to school, all the things that come with living in a home." Ethan looked at Rosie, then back at Beth. "I want to stay." Beth made notes. When she finished, she pulled Rosie aside. "I'm going to recommend emergency temporary custody, but you need to know that my supervisor, Sharon Whitmore, will be at the hearing, and she's already made her position clear. She thinks this situation is psychologically unhealthy, that you're using Ethan to replace your dead son." "I'm not," Rosie said firmly. "I believe you. But Sharon's concerns aren't baseless. You have to understand how this looks. A grief-stricken widow, a child who could be your deceased son's twin, the attachment forming at lightning speed. These are all red flags in our field. What do you suggest I do? Be honest, don't minimize your grief, but don't make this about Mikey. Make it about Ethan, about what he needs, about what you can provide." Beth checked her watch. "I have to file my report. I'll see you at the courthouse." After Beth left, Wyatt gathered everyone in the diner, 75 bikers, one widow, one scared child, one lawyer who looked far more confident than Rosie felt. "Here's how this works," Wyatt addressed the group. "Judge Mackenzie will hear from CPS, from me, and from anyone else he deems relevant. This isn't a trial. It's an emergency hearing to determine temporary placement pending a full investigation. Our goal is simple: prove that Ethan is safe with Rosie and that removing him would cause more harm than good." "What's our biggest obstacle?" Duke asked. "Sharon Whitmore. She's built a career on protecting children from unstable placements. In her view, Rosie's grief makes her unstable. The speed of this attachment makes it suspect, and the involvement of a motorcycle club makes it inappropriate." Hank spoke up from the back. "So we're a liability in Sharon's eyes." "Yes, but we're going to flip that narrative. You're not a motorcycle club. You're a community support network. You're proof that Rosie isn't alone, that she has resources and backup and people who will step up when needed." Wyatt looked at each of them. "But you have to look the part, so lose the colors for today. Business casual if you have it. We need the judge to see citizens, not stereotypes." Rosie watched as the club members nodded and dispersed to change clothes. These men and women who wore their patches with pride were willing to set them aside for her, for Ethan. The weight of that sacrifice settled in her chest. By 8:15, they were ready. Ethan wore new jeans and a button-up shirt Carson had bought. His hair was combed, his face scrubbed clean. He looked like any other 8-year-old boy heading to church or a family gathering, not a child who'd spent a month on the streets eating from dumpsters. Rosie straightened his collar. "You doing okay?" "I'm scared." "Me too, sweetheart. But we're scared together, and that makes it a little less scary, doesn't it?" Ethan nodded. He slipped his small hand into hers, and together they walked out to face whatever came next. The Yavapai County Courthouse sat on the plaza like it had for over a century, stone and history, and the weight of 1,000 decisions that changed lives. Rosie had walked past this building almost every day for 35 years, had barely given it a thought. Now it loomed like judgment waiting to fall. The courtroom was already filling when they arrived. Word had spread through Prescott faster than Rosie expected. Shop owners she'd fed for decades, waitresses who'd worked for her, customers who knew her only as the quiet woman who remembered their orders and never forgot a birthday. They'd come to support her, to be witnesses to whatever happened next. Sharon Whitmore sat at the front with Beth Marlowe and another CPS representative. Sharon was exactly what Rosie expected. 52 and sharp-edged. Her suit was immaculate, her hair pulled back in a tight bun that suggested nothing frivolous was tolerated. She looked at Rosie with clinical assessment, not unkind but not warm either. This was a woman who measured everything against protocol and found most things wanting. Wyatt guided Rosie and Ethan to seats at the front. Duke and Hank sat directly behind them. The rest of the club filled the gallery, all in civilian clothes, all silent and respectful, all radiating the same quiet determination. At 9 sharp, the bailiff called for everyone to rise. Judge Sterling Mackenzie entered from his chambers. He was in his late 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen everything twice. He settled into his chair and surveyed the packed courtroom. This is an emergency hearing regarding the temporary placement of Ethan Cole, age 8, currently without legal guardians. His voice carried authority earned over decades on the bench. I've reviewed the preliminary reports from Child Protective Services. I understand there's some disagreement about the appropriate placement. Sharon Whitmore stood. Your Honor, if I may address the court. Proceed, Ms. Whitmore. Sharon moved to the podium with the confidence of someone who'd argued hundreds of cases. Your Honor, while we appreciate Ms. Brennan's compassion in this situation, we have serious concerns about this proposed placement. Ms. Brennan is a 58-year-old widow who lost her only child 20 years ago. She's had no child-rearing experience since then. She operates a business that requires her attention 6 days a week. And most concerning, Ethan bears a striking resemblance to her deceased son. We believe Ms. Brennan's emotional attachment is based on grief rather than what's genuinely best for this child. Rosie felt each word like a physical blow. Sharon wasn't wrong about the facts, but she was wrong about what they meant. Furthermore, Sharon continued, Ms. Brennan's primary support system consists of members of a motorcycle club. While I'm sure these individuals mean well, they do not constitute an appropriate environment for raising a vulnerable child who's experienced significant trauma. Judge Mackenzie made notes. Mr. Thornton, I assume you have a response. Wyatt stood. Your Honor, Mrs. Whitmore is correct that Mrs. Brennan has experienced loss. What she fails to acknowledge is that this experience makes Mrs. Brennan uniquely qualified to help a child who's also experienced devastating loss. Ethan's mother died a month ago. He's been living on the streets, afraid of a system that's supposed to protect him. In Mizzou's Brennan, he's found the first adult who saw him as a person rather than a problem. The speed of the attachment is precisely the concern, Sharon interjected. The speed of the attachment is evidence of desperate need, meeting compassionate response, Wyatt countered. Your Honor, I have 89 letters of character reference for Ms. Brennan. Business owners, clergy, community leaders, all attesting to her stability, her generosity, and her fitness as a guardian. I also have medical records showing that Ethan received more comprehensive care in 24 hours with Ms. Brennan than he received in a month on the streets. Judge Mackenzie held up a hand. I'll review the letters. But first, I want to hear from the caseworker who conducted the home assessment. Ms. Marlowe. Beth stood and approached the witness stand. She was sworn in and took her seat. Ms. Marlowe, you conducted the preliminary home assessment. What did you find? Beth opened her folder. I found a 2-bedroom apartment above Ms. Brennan's business. Clean, safe, appropriate. 1 bedroom has been converted for Ethan's use. It previously belonged to Ms. Brennan's deceased son, but has been updated with age-appropriate furnishings and belongings. And your assessment of Ms. Brennan's fitness as a guardian. Beth took a breath. Your Honor, my professional opinion is that Ms. Brennan is capable of providing appropriate care. She demonstrated quick thinking in securing medical attention and legal representation for Ethan. She has stable finances and a support network. My concerns minimal as they are centered around the emotional aspects Ms. Whitmore mentioned. The similarity between Ethan and Ms. Brennan's deceased son, the rapid attachment. But, the judge prompted, but I still recommend temporary placement with her, with conditions, regular check-ins, mandatory counseling for both Ms. Brennan and Ethan, ongoing monitoring. I believe Ethan is safer and better served staying with Ms. Brennan than entering the foster system at this time. Sharon stood again. Your Honor, I must object. Ms. Marlowe is allowing emotion to cloud her professional judgment. My judgment is based on what I observed, Beth said firmly, a child who feels safe for the first time in a month, an adult willing to completely restructure her life to provide care, and a community rallying to support them both. Judge Mackenzie studied both women. Ms. Marlowe, you're aware that your supervisor disagrees with your recommendation. I am, Your Honor. And you're willing to stand by it anyway. I am. The judge made more notes. Then he looked up. I'd like to speak with Ethan. Rosie's heart stopped. Ethan's hand tightened in hers. It's okay, Rosie whispered. Just tell the truth. Ethan stood and walked to the witness stand. He looked impossibly small in the large chair. The bailiff brought over a phone book for him to sit on so he could see over the bench. The absurdity of it would have been funny in any other context. But here it was just heartbreaking. A child so small needing a phone book to be seen. Judge Mackenzie's expression softened when Ethan was settled. Hello, Ethan. My name is Judge Mackenzie. Do you know why you're here today? To see if I can stay with Miss Rosie. That's right. And I need to ask you some questions so I can make the best decision. Okay, Ethan nodded. Ethan, how long have you known Ms. Brennan? Since yesterday morning. She found me into the dumpster. And in that time, has she treated you well? Yes, sir. She gave me food and cleaned my feet and got me clothes and a bed. Do you feel safe with her? Yes. Why? Ethan thought about it. Because she's sad like me. She understands what it's like when someone you love dies. The courtroom went very quiet. Can you explain what you mean? Judge Mackenzie asked gently. Miss Rosie's son died a long time ago. She still misses him. I can tell. But she doesn't try to make me be him. She just understands that I miss my mom. Nobody else understands that. What about foster care, Ethan, a family who could take care of you? Ethan's face closed off. Foster families don't really want you. They just get paid to keep you. My mom told me about it. She grew up in foster care. She said some people were nice, but most just wanted the money. And you think Ms. Brennan wants you for a different reason? She doesn't get paid. She just wants me. How do you know that? Ethan looked directly at Judge Mackenzie. Because she cried when she found me. Real crying, like it hurt her that I was in the trash. Nobody else cried. Rosie felt tears streaming down her face. She didn't try to hide them. Judge Mackenzie was quiet for a moment. One more question, Ethan. If I let you stay with Ms. Brennan, you'll have to follow rules, go to school, do homework. All the things children do. Can you handle that? Yes, sir, even if it's hard. Ethan's voice was clear. I walked 100 miles. I can do hard things. Something shifted in the courtroom. Rosie felt it. The way Ethan's simple honesty cut through all the legal arguments and professional concerns. Here was a child who'd survived the unsurvivable, and he was asking for the chance to stop surviving and start living. Judge Mackenzie dismissed Ethan, and he returned to sit beside Rosie. The judge shuffled papers, made notes. The silence stretched. Finally, he spoke. I've heard compelling arguments from both sides. Ms. Whitmore, your concerns are noted and valid. Rapid attachments formed in crisis can be unstable. Grief can cloud judgment. Unconventional support systems require scrutiny. He paused. However, I'm also persuaded by Ms. Marlowe's assessment and by what I observed from Ethan himself. This child has been failed by every system meant to protect him. His mother died and he ended up sleeping in garbage. That is unacceptable. He looked directly at Rosie. Miss Brennan, stand, please. Rosie stood on shaking legs. I'm granting emergency temporary custody of Ethan Cole to you for a period of 6 months. During that time, you will comply with all CPS requirements. Weekly home visits, mandatory family counseling, individual therapy for Ethan to process his trauma. You will enroll him in school within 1 week. You will provide regular medical care, and you will maintain appropriate boundaries and stability. Rosie couldn't breathe. 6 months. She had 6 months. This custody is conditional, Judge Mackenzie continued. Any indication that Ethan's well-being is compromised, any sign of instability, and he will be removed immediately. Ms. Whitmore will conduct monthly reviews. At the end of 6 months, we will reconvene to determine whether this placement should become permanent. Do you understand these conditions? Yes, Your Honor. Rosie's voice cracked. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Raising a traumatized child isn't easy. Doing it under CPS scrutiny is harder. You're going to be questioned and doubted and watched constantly. Can you handle that? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Mackenzie's expression softened slightly. Then I wish you luck, both of you. He banged his gavel. This hearing is adjourned. The courtroom erupted, not in chaos but in quiet celebration. People hugging, crying. The club members surrounding Rosie and Ethan like a protective wall. Wyatt was smiling. Beth looked relieved. Even some of the court staff were wiping their eyes. Only Sharon Whitmore sat unmoved. She gathered her papers with precise movements and approached Rosie. Ms. Brennan, I want to be very clear. I will be watching every visit, every report, every interaction. I don't believe this is the right placement, and I will be looking for any justification to remove Ethan from your care. I suggest you be perfect. I'll do my best, Rosie said evenly. Your best better be flawless. Sharon turned and left. Duke appeared at Rosie's side. Charming woman. She's doing her job, protecting Ethan. We're protecting Ethan. She's protecting her protocols. But Duke let it go. He pulled Rosie into a hug. You did good, Rosie. Really good. Ethan tugged on Rosie's hand. Does this mean I get to stay? Rosie knelt down and pulled him into a hug. For 6 months. And then if we do everything right, forever. Forever. Ethan's voice was muffled against her shoulder. Forever. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of appointments and adjustments. Ethan started 3rd grade at Mountain View Elementary. The first day, Rosie walked him to his classroom and met his teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Patterson, who promised to watch for signs of trauma or struggle. Ethan clung to Rosie's hand. What if the other kids don't like me? Then they're missing out on knowing a very brave boy. Rosie kissed his forehead, but I think they'll like you just fine. She was right. By the end of the first week, Ethan had made 2 friends. Boys who didn't care that he'd been homeless, or that his mom was dead, or that he lived above a diner with a widow and 75 honorary uncles. They just cared that he was good at kickball and shared his snacks. Therapy started the following Monday. Dr. Sarah Mitchell specialized in childhood trauma. She met with Ethan twice a week and Rosie once. The sessions were hard. Ethan had nightmares, panic attacks when Rosie was out of sight, moments of rage and grief that exploded without warning. But slowly progress emerged. Ethan started talking about his mother without breaking down. Started sleeping through the night more often than not. Started trusting that when Rosie said she'd be there, she would be. The weekly CPS visits were harder. Beth came every Tuesday at 3. She interviewed Ethan privately, inspected the apartment, reviewed school reports and therapy notes. She was kind, but thorough, and she reported everything to Sharon. Sharon herself came for the monthly reviews. She was colder than Beth, more clinical. She questioned everything. Why was Ethan's bedtime 8:30 instead of 8? Why did Rosie let him help in the diner kitchen? Why were there so many bikers around? Rosie answered every question patiently, explained her reasoning, provided documentation, remained calm even when Sharon's implications stung. After the second monthly visit, Sharon pulled Rosie aside. You're doing better than I expected. Thank you. That wasn't a compliment. I expected you to fail. The fact that you haven't yet doesn't mean you won't. Sharon's eyes were hard. Grief is tricky. It can hide. Wait. Come back when you think you're past it. And when it does, you might take Ethan down with you. That won't happen. You can't promise that? Maybe not. But I can promise to get help if I need it. To prioritize Ethan's needs over my own feelings. To be the mother he deserves. We'll see. Sharon left without another word. November became December. The routine settled in. School, diner, therapy, homework, dinner, bedtime. The ordinary rhythms of family life. And through it all, Ethan slowly became less like a frightened animal and more like a child. But in late December, things began to unravel. It started small. A school psychologist showed up unannounced to observe Ethan in class, asked the teacher questions about his behavior, his social interactions, his relationship with Rosie. The teacher, Mrs. Patterson, answered honestly. Yes, Ethan talked about Rosie frequently. Yes, he seemed very attached to her. No, she didn't see anything concerning about it. The psychologist thanked her and left. The report went to Sharon. Then in early January, a local newspaper ran a story. Widow's unusual custody arrangement raises questions. The article was careful, didn't name Rosie or Ethan directly, but anyone in Prescott would know who it was about. Anonymous sources called the situation concerning, suggested Rosie was unstable, that the motorcycle club's involvement was inappropriate, that Ethan was being used to fill a void. The article didn't go viral in any big way, but in a small town it might as well have. Suddenly Rosie faced whispers at the grocery store. Awkward silences when she entered a room. Parents at Ethan's school pulling their children aside when he approached. Ethan came home from school one day in mid-January with red eyes. The kids were saying things. Rosie's heart sank. What kind of things? That you're crazy, that you're just pretending to want me, that the bikers are dangerous. He looked up at her with devastated eyes. Are those things true? Rosie pulled him close. No, sweetheart. People are afraid of what they don't understand. They see you and me, and we don't fit into their boxes of how families should look, so they make up stories. But what if they're right? What if you do get tired of me? Ethan, look at me. She lifted his chin. I will never get tired of you. Never. You are not a replacement for Mikey. You're not a charity project. You're my son, and that's forever. Nothing anyone says can change that. Promise, I promise, on everything I have, on Mikey's memory, on my own life. You're mine and I'm yours, and nothing anyone says can change that. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew. And in late January, Ethan got into a fight at school. The call came during the lunch rush. Rosie was in the middle of taking orders when her phone rang. The principal's voice was careful, professional. The voice adults use when something bad has happened, but they're trying not to alarm you. Miss Brennan, there's been an incident involving Ethan. Could you come to the school? Rosie's stomach dropped. Is he hurt? No, but there was an altercation. I think it's best we discuss this in person. Rosie left Hank in charge of the diner and drove to Mountain View Elementary with her heart in her throat. She found Ethan sitting outside the principal's office, looking small and defiant. His knuckles were scraped, his shirt was torn, and his eyes were red from crying he was trying to pretend hadn't happened. Ethan, Rosie knelt in front of him. What happened? I didn't start it. His voice was tight, defensive. Derek said things, mean things. I told him to stop. He wouldn't stop. Principal Hayes emerged from her office. She gestured for Rosie to come inside. The story came out in pieces. Derek Thompson, a fourth grader known for testing boundaries, had been taunting Ethan at recess. Started with general teasing, escalated to specific cruelty, called Ethan's mother a junkie who overdosed and abandoned him, said Rosie was crazy and would get tired of Ethan soon, said the bikers were criminals and Ethan would end up in jail. Ethan had asked him to stop, had walked away, but Derek followed, kept pushing. And when Derek said that Rosie only wanted Ethan because she was too broken to have a real kid, Ethan snapped, shoved Derek. Derek shoved back. They ended up on the ground trading punches before teachers separated them. I have to suspend both boys, Principal Hayes said. Zero tolerance policy on fighting. 3 days. Rosie nodded. Her mind was already spinning ahead. A suspension would go in the file. Sharon would see it, would use it as evidence that Ethan was becoming violent, that the placement was making him worse instead of better. I understand, Rosie said. Can I talk to him? Of course. Rosie brought Ethan back into the principal's office and closed the door. She didn't yell, didn't lecture, just sat down next to him and waited. I'm sorry, Ethan said finally. I know I shouldn't have hit him, but he said you were broken, and you're not. You're the best person I know. Something cracked open in Rosie's chest. This child defending her, fighting for her, willing to break rules and face consequences because someone insulted the woman who'd taken him in. Ethan, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Rosie took his hands. What Derek said was cruel and wrong, but hitting him didn't make it less true. It just gave him power over you. Do you understand? When you let someone's words make you violent, you give them control. But he was lying about you. Was he? Am I not broken in some ways? Rosie's voice was gentle. I lost my son 20 years ago, and I'm still healing from it. That's a kind of broken. But here's what Derek doesn't understand. Broken things can still be beautiful, still be useful, still be exactly what someone needs. Ethan looked up at her with those blue eyes swimming in tears. You're what I need. And you're what I need, which is why we can't give people like Derek ammunition to use against us. We have to be smarter, better, because in 3 weeks there's a hearing that decides if you get to stay with me. And this suspension is going to be part of what they look at. I messed up, Ethan's voice broke. I messed everything up. No, you defended someone you love. That's not messing up. That's being human. But we have to find better ways to defend each other. Okay? Okay. They left the school together and drove home in silence. Rosie called Wyatt from the car. We have a problem. By the time they reached the apartment, Wyatt was already strategizing. It's not ideal, but it's not disastrous either. Kids fight, it's normal. We'll position it as Ethan defending his family. Show that he has healthy attachments and protective instincts. Sharon won't see it that way. No, she'll see it as evidence of instability, which is why we need to be proactive. Get Ethan into extra counseling sessions this week. Document his remorse. Show that he understands what he did wrong and is taking steps to do better. Rosie made the calls. Dr. Mitchell agreed to see Ethan 3 times that week instead of the usual 2. Ethan wrote an apology letter to Derek. Rosie set up a meeting with Derek's parents to apologize in person. They did everything right, everything by the book. But Sharon still found out. Of course she did. She called Rosie the next morning. Ms. Brennan, I've been informed of an incident at Ethan's school, a violent incident resulting in suspension. Yes, Ethan got into a fight. He's been disciplined appropriately and is receiving additional counseling. This is exactly the kind of behavioral regression I've been concerned about. A child who's been through trauma acting out violently suggests the current placement isn't providing adequate support. Or it suggests he's a normal 8-year-old who made a mistake. Rosie kept her voice even. Kids fight Ms. Whitmore. It doesn't mean the world is ending. It means something when the child has a history of trauma and instability. I'm filing an emergency assessment. I'll be there this afternoon to evaluate the situation. Sharon arrived at 3 with Beth in tow. Ethan was doing homework at the kitchen table. He looked up when they entered, and Rosie saw fear flash across his face. The same fear that had been there that first morning in the dumpster. The look of a child expecting the worst because the worst kept happening. Hello, Ethan. Sharon's voice was professional. Cool. I need to ask you some questions about what happened at school. Ethan looked at Rosie. She nodded encouragement. Tell the truth, sweetheart. For 20 minutes, Sharon questioned Ethan. What led to the fight? What Derek said? Why Ethan reacted the way he did? Ethan answered honestly. Said he was wrong to hit Derek. Said he knew better. Said he was sorry. But Sharon's questions kept circling back to one thing. Why did Derek's words about Rosie make Ethan so angry? Because he was saying mean things about someone I love, Ethan said finally, and I didn't want him to. Do you love Ms. Brennan? Yes. Why? Ethan looked confused by the question. Because she takes care of me, because she's nice, because she makes me feel safe. And before Ms. Brennan, who made you feel safe? My mom. So Ms. Brennan is like a replacement mother. Ethan's face crumpled. She's not replacing anybody. She's just Rosie. And I love her. Sharon made notes. After Ethan was dismissed to his room, she turned to Rosie. I'm very concerned about the level of attachment here. Ethan is exhibiting signs of what we call anxious attachment. He's fearful of losing you, defensive to the point of violence. This suggests an unhealthy dependency. Or it suggests a child who's lost everything learning to trust again. Rosie fought to keep her voice calm. You're pathologizing normal bonding behavior. I'm recognizing red flags that you're too emotionally invested to see. Sharon closed her folder. Ms. Brennan, I'm recommending at the hearing that Ethan be placed in traditional foster care. This arrangement has had 6 months to prove itself. In that time, we've seen behavioral issues, emotional dependency, and continued instability. I can't in good conscience recommend permanent custody. The words hit like bullets. Rosie felt them pierce through her carefully maintained composure. You're taking him away from me. I'm recommending placement that's in his best interest. I am his best interest. Rosie's voice rose. I'm the one who found him in garbage, who fed him and clothed him and loved him. Where were you when he was sleeping in a dumpster? Where was your precious system? The system failed him once. I won't let it fail him again by leaving him in an unstable situation. This isn't unstable. This is a family. This is a grief-stricken woman and a traumatized child enabling each other's pain. That's not family. That's codependence. Sharon stood. The hearing is in 3 weeks. I suggest you prepare Ethan for the transition. After Sharon left, Rosie stood in her kitchen and felt the world collapse. 6 months of work, of love, of progress. And Sharon was going to take Ethan anyway. Was going to prove that Rosie wasn't enough. that her love wasn't enough, that broken people couldn't build whole families. She found Ethan in his room sitting on his bed holding Mikey's old baseball glove. Tears streamed down his face. "I heard," he said quietly. "She's going to make me leave." Rosie sat beside him, pulled him close. "Not without a fight. We still have the hearing. The judge, Wyatt, all the people who support us." "But what if the judge agrees with her? What if they all think I should go somewhere else?" "Then we appeal. We fight harder." Rosie lifted his chin. "Ethan, look at me. I am not giving up on you. Do you understand? I don't care what Sharon says. I don't care what anyone says. You are my son, and I will fight for you until I have no fight left. And then I'll fight some more." "Why?" Ethan's voice was small. "I'm not even yours, not really. I'm just some kid you found. You are mine, not because of biology, not because a court said so, but because I chose you and you chose me. That's what makes a family. Choice, and I choose you every single day. I choose you." Ethan buried his face in her shoulder and sobbed. Great heaving sobs that shook his small frame. Rosie held him and cried too. Because maybe Sharon was right. Maybe they were both just broken people clinging to each other. But if that was true, what was wrong with that? Wasn't that what family did? Held each other up when the world tried to knock them down. That night after Ethan finally fell asleep, Rosie called Duke. "She's recommending removal." Duke swore. "Based on what? One school fight. Based on everything. The attachment, the dependency, the unconventional support system. She thinks we're enabling each other's trauma instead of healing it." "That's nonsense, is it?" Rosie's voice broke. "Duke, what if she's right? What if I am just using Ethan to replace Mikey? What if I'm hurting him instead of helping him?" "Stop. Stop right now." Duke's voice was firm. "You know that's not true. I've watched you with Ethan. I've seen how you put his needs first, how you get up at night when he has nightmares, how you advocate for him at school, how you love him. That's not replacement. That's real." "Then why doesn't Sharon see it?" "Because Sharon sees everything through the lens of protocol and procedure. She can't imagine that love, built on loss, can still be healthy, still be right. But you and I know different. We've both lost people. And we know that loss doesn't make you incapable of loving again. It makes you appreciate it more." Rosie wiped her eyes. "The hearing's in 3 weeks. What do? We fight. We bring everyone who believes in you, everyone who's seen Ethan thrive. We show the judge what Sharon refuses to see." For the next 3 weeks, the club mobilized. They gathered letters of support, organized character witnesses, compiled evidence of Ethan's progress. School records showing improved grades, medical records showing weight gain and healing, photos of Ethan smiling, laughing, being a normal kid. Mrs. Patterson agreed to testify about Ethan's classroom behavior. Dr. Mitchell prepared a report on his therapeutic progress. Even Derek's parents, moved by Ethan's apology, wrote a letter saying the fight was mutual and shouldn't be held against him. The community rallied. The 89 letters became 127. People Rosie barely knew stepped forward to say she'd made a difference in their lives, that they trusted her, that they believed in her. But through it all, Rosie felt the weight of what was coming. The final battle. The moment when a judge would decide whether broken people deserve second chances, whether love built on loss was strong enough to stand. The morning of the hearing arrived. Rosie woke at 4 again. But this time when she went to check on Ethan, she found him already awake, sitting in bed, holding the photograph of his mother. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Too scared?" Rosie sat on the edge of his bed. "Me too." "What happens if we lose?" "Then we fight some more, but Ethan, I want you to know something. Whatever that judge says today, you're my son. That's not up for debate. That's not conditional. You're mine, and I'm yours. A court can recognize that or ignore it, but they can't change it. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded. Then he looked at the photograph in his hands. "Do you think my mom would be okay with this? With me calling you mom?" Rosie felt tears prick her eyes. "I think your mom loved you more than anything. And I think she'd want you to be happy, to be to be safe, to have someone who loves you. So yes, I think she'd be okay with it. More than okay." Ethan set the photograph on his nightstand, next to the baseball glove. His mother's memory and Mikey's legacy, side by side. "Then let's go fight," he said. And together they got ready to face the judge one more time. The courthouse was different this time. 6 months ago, there had been curiosity, support, a small-town crowd wondering what would happen to the widow and the boy from the dumpster. Today there was something else, something heavier. National attention. News vans parked outside, reporters with cameras asking questions about the case that had somehow become a story bigger than Prescott. Inside the gallery was packed beyond capacity. 250 people, maybe more. Every seat filled, people standing against the walls. The bailiff had tried to limit entry, but Judge Mackenzie had overruled him. If the community wanted to witness this, they would witness it. Rosie walked in with Ethan's hand in hers. The boy wore the same button-up shirt from 6 months ago. It fit better now. He'd grown, not just physically, in every way that mattered. But today he looked small again, scared again. The way he'd looked that first morning in the dumpster. Duke and Hank flanked them. 73 other Iron Ravens members filled the first 3 rows, all in civilian clothes. Pressed shirts and slacks, respectful, silent. But their presence was a statement, a wall of solidarity that said, "You go through us first." Sharon Whitmore sat at the prosecution table with 3 lawyers. 3. Rosie had Wyatt, just Wyatt. But Wyatt Thornton was a man who'd spent 30 years in courtrooms and didn't need help to make his point. Beth Marlowe sat behind Sharon looking uncomfortable. She'd filed her report, had stood by her recommendation for Rosie. But her boss was here now, and Sharon had the power. The bailiff called for everyone to rise. Judge Mackenzie entered. He looked older than he had 6 months ago. Tired. This case had clearly weighed on him. He settled into his chair and surveyed the packed room. "We're here to review the temporary custody arrangement for Ethan Cole." His voice was measured, careful. 6 months ago, I granted emergency placement with Rose Brennan pending a full investigation. That investigation is complete. Today we determine whether this placement becomes permanent or whether Ethan enters the foster care system. This is not a small decision. This is a child's entire future. He looked at Sharon. "Ms. Whitmore, you've filed a comprehensive report recommending removal. Proceed." Sharon stood, approached the podium. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed absolutely in her position, who saw no shades of gray. Only right and wrong, only protocol and deviation. "Your Honor, I've spent 6 months observing this placement, conducting assessments, reviewing reports, and I've reached a clear conclusion. This arrangement, while well-intentioned, is psychologically harmful to Ethan Cole and should be terminated immediately." She clicked a remote, a screen lowered behind her, a PowerPoint presentation. Sharon had brought visual aids. The first slide showed a timeline. Day 1 today, 180. Each week marked with incidents, sessions, reports. "The facts are undisputed," Sharon continued. "Ms. Brennan is a 58-year-old widow who lost her son 20 years ago. She's never fully processed that grief. Ethan bears a striking physical resemblance to her deceased child. The attachment formed within hours. This is textbook grief transference." Next slide. Photos, Ethan and Mikey, side by side. The resemblance was undeniable. Same age, same coloring, same eyes. Sharon let the image sit. "Furthermore, we've documented concerning behavioral patterns. Ethan exhibits signs of anxious attachment. He becomes distressed when separated from Ms. Brennan. He's defensive of her to the point of violence." Sharon clicked to the next slide. The school incident report. In January, Ethan physically assaulted another child who made comments about Ms. Brennan. This suggests an unhealthy enmeshment. Rosie felt Ethan tense beside her. She squeezed his hand. Additionally, Ms. Brennan's primary support system consists of a motorcycle club. While these individuals may mean well, they represent an unconventional and potentially concerning influence on a vulnerable child. Sharon clicked to a slide showing photos of the Iron Ravens, some from their website, community service events, toy drives. But Sharon had chosen images that looked intimidating. Leather, motorcycles, tattoos. My professional assessment supported by psychological evaluation is that Ethan and Mrs. Brennan are engaged in mutual codependency. They're using each other to avoid processing legitimate trauma. This isn't healing, it's enabling, and it will cause long-term harm if allowed to continue. Sharon clicked to her final slide. A simple recommendation in bold text. Immediate placement in traditional foster care. Your Honor, I've identified a loving, stable, two-parent family willing to take Ethan. Professional foster parents with experience in the trauma care. This is the appropriate placement for a child with Ethan's history and needs. She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Rosie felt like she couldn't breathe. Sharon had made it sound so clinical, so certain, so obviously wrong to let Ethan stay. Judge Mackenzie nodded. Mr. Thornton, your response. Wyatt stood. He didn't have a PowerPoint, didn't need one. He walked to the podium carrying a single folder. Your Honor, Ms. Whitmore has presented a theory, a hypothesis built on cherry-picked data and predetermined conclusions. Allow me to present the facts. He opened the folder. Fact 1. Ethan Cole arrived in Prescott malnourished, injured, and traumatized. He weighed 63 pounds. He had infected wounds on his feet. He'd been living on the streets for 30 days. Wyatt pulled out medical records. Today, Ethan weighs 81 pounds, a healthy weight for his age. His wounds have healed. His nightmares have decreased from nightly to twice a week. His therapist reports significant progress in processing his mother's death. These are not the markers of harmful codependency. These are the markers of healing. He set down the medical records and picked up school reports. Fact 2. Ethan was enrolled in school within 1 week of placement. He's maintained a B average. His teacher describes him as engaged, kind, and well-adjusted. He has friends. He participates in activities. He's thriving academically and socially. Wyatt looked directly at Sharon. Ms. Whitmore mentioned one fight, one incident in 6 months, a fight where Ethan was defending his family from bullying. His teacher wrote a letter about this incident. With the court's permission, I'd like to read it. Judge Mackenzie nodded. Wyatt unfolded a paper. In my 23 years of teaching, I've seen many children from difficult backgrounds. Ethan Cole is remarkable. Yes, he got into a fight, but he also showed remorse, took responsibility, and made genuine amends. The other child's parents have since become friends with Ms. Brennan. This is not the behavior of a troubled child. This is the behavior of a child learning to navigate the world with support and guidance. He set the letter down. Fact 3, Ms. Brennan has 127 letters of support. Business owners, clergy, teachers, veterans, medical professionals, people who've known her for decades attest to her character, her stability, and her fitness as a guardian. I have them here if the court wishes to review them. Wyatt gestured to a box on his table. Stacks of letters. Ms. Whitmore calls the Iron Ravens an unconventional support system. I call them community. These are men and women who've raised millions for children's hospitals, who volunteer at youth centers, who mentor at-risk teenagers. Yes, they ride motorcycles. That doesn't make them unfit to care about a child. He paused. Let that sink in. Your Honor, Ms. Whitmore is correct about one thing. This situation doesn't fit her template for what family should look like. But since when do families have to fit templates? Since when is unconventional synonymous with harmful? Wyatt closed his folder. Ethan Cole was failed by the conventional system. He was left alone after his mother died. He walked 100 miles because he was terrified of being placed in conventional foster care. And now, after 6 months of thriving in an unconventional placement, we're going to send him back to the system he fled. That's not protection. That's punishment for not conforming. He returned to his seat. The courtroom remained silent, but Rosie could feel the shift. The way people were leaning forward, listening harder. Judge Mackenzie made notes. I'd like to hear from witnesses. Ms. Whitmore, do you have anyone who wishes to testify? Sharon stood. Your Honor, we have Dr. Patricia Hamilton, a child psychologist who evaluated Ethan. A woman in her 40s approached the stand. She was sworn in. Doctor Hamilton, you conducted a psychological evaluation of Ethan Cole. What did you find? Dr. Hamilton opened a file. I found a child exhibiting signs of anxious attachment disorder. He shows distress when separated from Ms. Brennan. He's hypervigilant about her whereabouts. He becomes defensive when she's criticized. These are concerning patterns that suggest unhealthy dependency. And your professional opinion on the placement. I believe Ethan would benefit from placement with a two-parent family trained in attachment therapy. The current situation, while stable in some ways, is reinforcing maladaptive coping mechanisms. Wyatt stood. Dr. Hamilton, how many sessions did you have with Ethan? One, a 2-hour evaluation. One session, and in that session, did Ethan tell you he felt safe with Mrs. Brennan? Yes, but did he tell you he wanted to stay with her? Yes, but that's consistent with anxious attachment. The child becomes dependent on the caregiver even if the relationship isn't healthy. Did you speak with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Ethan's primary therapist, who's seen him twice a week for 6 months? Dr. Hamilton hesitated. I reviewed her notes. Did you speak with her? No. No further questions. Judge Mackenzie looked at Wyatt. Mr. Thornton, your witnesses. Your Honor, I'd like to call Duke McGraw. Duke stood, walked to the stand. At 6'3" with his gray beard and scarred face, he cut an imposing figure even in civilian clothes. He was sworn in. Mr. McGraw, how do you know Mrs. Brennan? I was best friends with her husband, Garrett. We worked together at the copper mine for 15 years. When Garrett died, I made him a promise. I'd watch over Rosie and her son. When Mikey died 5 years later, that promise didn't end. So you've known Ms. Brennan for how long? 25 years. And in that time, have you ever seen her act in a way that suggested she was unstable or unfit? Never. Rosie's the toughest person I know. Mikey's death broke her heart, but it didn't break her. If anything, it made her stronger, more careful with the people she loves, more aware of how precious life is. What's your assessment of her relationship with Ethan? Duke looked at Rosie, then at Ethan. That boy was dying when Rosie found him. Not physically, though that was coming. Dying inside. And Rosie brought him back to life. That's not codependency. That's love. Real love. The kind that shows up. The kind that stays. Thank you, Mr. McGraw. Sharon stood. Mr. McGraw, you're the president of a motorcycle club, correct? That's right. A club that by definition exists outside mainstream society. We're citizens who ride motorcycles. We pay taxes. We follow laws. We serve our community. But you'd agree that your lifestyle is unconventional. I'd agree that we don't fit everyone's idea of normal, but neither does Rosie and Ethan. And that's okay. Normal is overrated. Several people in the gallery laughed quietly. Judge Mackenzie gave them a look, and they stopped. Wyatt called more witnesses. Mrs. Patterson, Ethan's teacher, who testified about his progress and adjustment. A diner regular, an elderly veteran named Howard, who'd known Rosie for 30 years, who broke down crying, talking about how she'd fed him for free when he was broke after his wife died. She never asked for nothing, Howard said, wiping his eyes. Just fed me, every day, for 2 years. That's who Rosie Brennan is. She takes care of people. And now she's taking care of Ethan. And he's lucky to have her. A mother from Ethan's school testified about how kind he was to her son, how he'd helped her boy with reading, how they played together on weekends. Each witness built the same picture. A woman who'd turned grief into purpose. A boy who was healing. A community that supported them both. Then Wyatt stood. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence medical records documenting a discrepancy in Ms. Whitmore's report. Sharon's head snapped up. Objection? What discrepancy? If the court will allow, I'll explain. Judge Mackenzie nodded. Wyatt approached the bench with a file. In her report, Ms. Whitmore documented a bruise on Ethan's arm as occurring on January 15th. She photographed it and filed it as evidence of possible physical harm. However, medical records from the urgent care clinic show Ethan was treated for a playground fall on January 14th. The bruise was documented then, by the clinic, before Ms. Whitmore's assessment. The courtroom went very still. Furthermore, timestamp data on Ms. Whitmore's photographs shows they were taken on January 16th, a full day after she claimed the incident occurred, after the bruise was already documented by medical professionals as accidental. Sharon stood abruptly. Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. The dates are in your own report, Ms. Whitmore. Judge Mackenzie's voice was cold. You filed documentation claiming you observed a fresh bruise on January 15th, but medical records show the injury occurred January 14th, and you didn't photograph it until January 16th. Can you explain that? Sharon's face flushed. I may have been mistaken about the exact date. You filed a report suggesting possible abuse based on a bruise that had already been medically documented as accidental. And you did so with incorrect dates that made it appear you'd observed it earlier than you had. Your Honor, I was concerned for the child's welfare. You falsified a timeline in an official report. The judge's words were sharp, precise. Whether through incompetence or intent, you misrepresented facts to this court. Sharon sat down heavily. The confidence was gone. For the first time, she looked shaken. But then she stood again, voice rising. Your Honor, I may have made an error in documentation, but my concerns remain valid. This placement is psychologically harmful. I've spent my entire career protecting children. I can't let another child suffer because... She stopped, caught herself, but it was too late. Because what, Ms. Whitmore? The judge asked quietly. Sharon's composure cracked. Her voice broke. Because I can't let another child die. The courtroom held its breath. I had a daughter, Sharon continued, words tumbling out. Emma, she died 8 years ago, car accident. She was 10. And I've spent every day since trying to make sure no other child falls through the cracks. Trying to save everyone because I couldn't save her. Tears streamed down her face. And maybe I've been too rigid. Maybe I've been so afraid of unconventional placements failing that I can't see when they succeed. But I look at Ethan and I see Emma, and I can't bear the thought of making the wrong call again. She sat down, covered her face with her hands. The courtroom was silent, but it wasn't a sympathetic silence. It was the silence of people realizing that Sharon's crusade against Rosie had never been about protocol. It had been about grief, about fear, about a woman trying to save her dead daughter by controlling everyone else's children. Judge Mackenzie's expression was unreadable. Mr. Thornton, do you wish to call any more witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to call Ethan Cole. Rosie's hand tightened on Ethan's. He looked up at her. It's okay, she whispered. Just tell the truth. Ethan walked to the stand. The bailiff brought the phone book again. Ethan climbed up, sat down, looked impossibly small against the large chair. Judge Mackenzie leaned forward. Hello again, Ethan. You remember me? Yes, sir. I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to be very honest. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Ethan, you've lived with Ms. Brennan for 6 months now. How has that been? Good, really good. Can you tell me why? Ethan thought about it. When he spoke, his voice was clear. Because she treats me like I matter, not like a problem to solve, like I'm worth something. Ms. Whitmore thinks you'd be better off with a different family. What do you think about that? Ethan's face went pale, but he didn't cry, didn't break down. He looked directly at the judge. If you make me leave, I'll run away. I survived a month on the streets. I can do it again. I'd rather be alone than with people who don't want me. And you think Miss Brennan wants you? I know she does. How? Ethan looked at Rosie, his eyes filled with tears, but his voice stayed steady. Because every morning she wakes me up and says, "Good morning, kiddo." Because she helps me with my homework even when the diner's busy. Because she keeps a picture of her son next to my picture and she talks to both of us like we're both hers. Because when I have nightmares, she doesn't get mad. She just holds me until I can sleep again. He wiped his eyes. And because when Derek said she was crazy, it made me so angry I couldn't think straight. Because she's not crazy. She's the best person I know. And I don't want to live anywhere else, ever. Even if it means following rules, going to school, doing chores. Even if it means all that. I walked 100 miles, sir. I can handle rules. Judge Mackenzie nodded slowly. Thank you, Ethan. Ethan returned to his seat. Rosie pulled him close, whispered in his ear, I'm proud of you. The judge looked at Wyatt. Any other witnesses? Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to call Rose Brennan. Rosie stood, walked to the stand, was sworn in, sat down. She could feel 250 pairs of eyes on her, could feel the weight of the moment. Everything came down to this, Wyatt approached. Ms. Brennan, Miss Whitmore has suggested you're using Ethan to replace your deceased son. How do you respond? Rosie took a breath. Here it was. The moment of truth. She could deny it, could explain it away, could make it sound better than it was. But she'd promised herself she'd tell the truth, even if it cost her everything. Your Honor, Ms. Whitmore is right. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Wyatt's eyes widened. Even Ethan looked shocked. Rosie continued, a voice steady. Ethan reminds me of Mikey. Same age, same eyes, same brave heart. Every time I look at him, I see echoes of my son. And yes, that's part of why I wanted to help him. Why I felt such an immediate connection. Sharon leaned forward, vindication in her eyes. But here's what Mrs. Whitmore doesn't understand. Rosie's voice grew stronger. I'm not replacing Mikey with Ethan. I'm honoring Mikey by loving Ethan. My son taught me how to be a mother, how to love unconditionally, how to put someone else's needs before my own. When Mikey died, I thought those lessons died with him, that I'd never get to use them again, that being a mother was something in my past. She looked directly at Ethan. Then I found Ethan in that dumpster, and I realized Mikey's lessons weren't wasted, that I could still be a mother, not to Mikey, he's gone and nothing will bring him back, but to Ethan, this specific, particular, irreplaceable boy who needed exactly what I had to give. Rosie turned to Sharon. You think Ethan and I are enabling each other's pain, that we're clinging to each other instead of healing. But you're wrong, we're healing because of each other. Ethan's learning that losing someone doesn't mean you stop loving, that trust can be rebuilt after it's broken, that family isn't about biology, it's about choice and commitment. She turned to the judge. And I'm learning that my heart is bigger than I thought, that I can love the son I lost and the son I found, that grief and joy can exist in the same space, that being broken doesn't mean being useless. Sometimes broken things are exactly what someone needs because they understand what it's like to hurt. Tears streamed down Rosie's face, but she didn't wipe them away. Ms. Whitmore thinks I'm broken. She's right. I am broken. But broken things can still work, can still love, can still be exactly what a child needs. She paused, gathered herself. Ethan didn't replace Mikey. He showed me that Mikey's death doesn't have to be the end of my story as a mother, that I can honor my first son by loving my second son with everything I learned from losing the first. And if that's codependent or unhealthy or whatever clinical term you want to use, I don't care, because it's real. It's love. And it's exactly what both of us need. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of people crying. Your Honor, Rosie continued, I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you that boy is mine. I'm his. That's a fact. You can acknowledge it or ignore it, but you can't change it. She sat back, exhausted, exposed, everything laid bare. Wyatt approached for redirect. Ms. Brennan, one more question. If the court grants you permanent custody, what does that mean to you? Rosie looked at Ethan, at his blue eyes and his gap-toothed smile and his fierce, brave heart. It means I get to watch him grow up, teach him to drive, help him with algebra, embarrass him at his graduation, walk him down the aisle someday if he wants that. It means I get to be his mom, not for 6 months, not conditionally, but forever, the way it should be. Thank you, Ms. Brennan. As Rosie returned to her seat, something happened. Helen Morrison, Ethan's tutor, stood up in the back of the courtroom. Your Honor, may I speak? Judge Mackenzie looked surprised. Are you a witness for either side, ma'am? No, sir, but I have something to say. Proceed. Helen walked to the aisle. She was 73 years old, retired teacher, had been working with Ethan 3 times a week for 5 months. I've been a teacher for 40 years. I've seen hundreds of families. And I can tell you that what Ms. Brennan and Ethan have is real. It's not perfect. It's messy and complicated and built on shared pain. But it's love, real love, the kind that shows up, the kind that stays. She turned to Sharon. You want to take Ethan from this because it doesn't fit your textbook model of family. But families come in all forms. And sometimes the most unconventional ones are the ones that work best. Sometimes broken people are exactly who other broken people need. Helen sat down, and then something remarkable happened. Howard, the elderly veteran, stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to speak too. Then Mrs. Patterson, then the mother of Ethan's friend, then a diner customer, then another, and another. One by one, people stood, asked to speak, told stories of Rosie's kindness, her strength, her fitness to be a mother. For 30 minutes, Judge Mackenzie let them speak, let the community have its say. And through it all, Sharon sat silent, her carefully constructed case crumbling under the weight of a town that refused to let Rosie fail. Finally, the judge held up his hand. I've heard enough. I'm going to take a 20-minute recess to review my notes. We'll reconvene for my decision. The courtroom emptied into the hallway. Rosie stood with Ethan, Duke, and Hank. Wyatt was on his phone, pacing. The Iron Ravens formed a protective circle. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. Sharon Whitmore stood alone on the other side of the hallway. Beth had gone to her, put a hand on her shoulder. Sharon was crying, quietly. The fight had gone out of her. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Finally, they were called back in. Everyone took their seats. Judge Mackenzie entered. The room stood. Saturday. Held its breath. I've presided over family court for 30 years, the judge began. I've seen thousands of cases, placed hundreds of children, and I can tell you that there's no perfect formula for determining what makes a good home. We have guidelines, best practices, research. But at the end of the day, every case is unique, every child is different, and sometimes the right answer isn't the one that looks right on paper. He looked at Sharon. Ms. Whitmore, I understand your concerns. I understand your dedication to protecting children, but I also understand that you allowed personal grief to cloud your professional judgment. You falsified documentation. You recommended removal based on emotion rather than evidence. Effective immediately, you're removed from this case. I'm referring you to the state licensing board for review. Sharon nodded, didn't protest, just accepted it. As for Ms. Marlowe, your recommendation is noted and appreciated. You demonstrated professional integrity in standing by your assessment despite pressure from your supervisor. Beth looked relieved. Then Judge Mackenzie turned to Rosie. Ms. Brennan, your honesty today was remarkable. You didn't try to hide your grief or pretend it doesn't influence your relationship with Ethan. Instead, you showed how it informs it, how it makes you a better mother because you understand loss, because you don't take love for granted. He paused. I've seen people who look perfect on paper destroy children through neglect or abuse, and I've seen unconventional families create miracles. What matters isn't how a family looks from the outside, it's what happens inside. Whether a child feels safe, loved, valued, whether they're given the tools to heal and grow. The judge looked at Ethan. And it's clear to me that Ethan has all of those things with Ms. Brennan. Hope surged in Rosie's chest. Therefore, I'm granting full permanent custody of Ethan Cole to Rose Brennan. The courtroom erupted, people cheering, crying, hugging. Ethan launched himself at Rosie and she caught him, held him while he sobbed into her shoulder. Duke was crying, Hank was crying, and half the Iron Ravens were wiping their eyes. Judge Mackenzie banged his gavel. Furthermore, he continued over the noise, I'm approving a petition for legal name change. The room quieted. Ethan, do you understand what that means? Ethan lifted his tear-stained face from Rosie's shoulder. No, sir. It means your name would change from Ethan Cole to Ethan Michael Brennan, keeping your birth mother's last name as your middle name, adding Michael to honor Ms. Brennan's son, and taking Brennan as your last name, making you officially, legally, her son. Is that something you want? Ethan looked at Rosie. Can I? Rosie was crying too hard to speak. She just nodded. Ethan turned back to the judge. Yes, sir, I want to be Ethan Michael Brennan. Then that's what you'll be. Judge Mackenzie banged his gavel one final time. Permanent custody granted, name change approved. This case is closed. The celebration spilled out of the courthouse and into the plaza. 75 bikers cheering, townspeople congratulating, news cameras capturing everything. A spontaneous parade forming as the club fired up their motorcycles. Duke brought his bike around. It had the sidecar attachment. Ethan climbed in, grinning from ear to ear. Rosie settled beside him. And they rode through downtown Prescott with 74 other bikes behind them, past the diner, past the school, past all the places that made up their life together. People stopped to watch. Some waved, some cheered, some probably still whispered about the crazy widow and her biker family. But Rosie didn't care. She had her son. Really, truly, legally her son. And nothing else mattered. The party at the Iron Ravens clubhouse lasted all day. Food and music and laughter. Ethan was passed from biker to biker, each one congratulating him. Hank gave him a leather jacket, child size, with a patch that said, honorary member. Carson taught him the complicated club handshake. Helen brought a cake decorated with books because Ethan loved reading. As the sun set, Rosie found a quiet corner, watched Ethan playing with other kids, running around, laughing, being 8 years old without the weight of survival on his shoulders. Duke sat down beside her. How you feeling? Like I can breathe for the first time in 6 months, maybe in 20 years. She turned to him. Thank you for everything, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. You did the hard work, Rosie. I just provided backup. Good backup. The best. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Duke said something that made Rosie's eyes fill with tears again. Garrett would be proud of you, you know. And Mikey, too. You took everything they taught you about love, and you gave it to another kid who needed it. That's not betrayal. That's legacy. The words settled in Rosie's chest. Legacy. Mikey's legacy wasn't his death. It was what Rosie built from the ruins of it, the love she still had to give, the strength she didn't know she possessed, the family she created from loss and hope and fierce determination. That night after the party wound down, Rosie and Ethan returned to the apartment above the diner. Their apartment, their home, forever. Rosie made hot chocolate. They sat at the kitchen table together, just the two of them, mother and son. Miss Rosie, Ethan started. You can call me Mom now, if you want, Rosie said gently. The judge made it official. Mom, Ethan tested the word, smiled. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything. Will you tell me about Mikey, about your son, my brother? Rosie felt her throat tighten, but it was a good tightness. Not grief anymore. Something else. Something like healing. I'd love to. She told him about Mikey, about his laugh and his bravery and his generous heart, about how he used to make her breakfast in bed on Mother's Day, always burning the toast, about how he loved baseball and hated mushrooms and cried during sad movies even though he pretended not to. Ethan listened, asked questions, smiled at the funny stories. And Rosie realized something. Talking about Mikey didn't hurt as much as it used to, because now there was room for both joy and sorrow, both past and present, both the son she lost and the son she found. Later, Rosie tucked Ethan into bed, in his room, in their home. Mom, Ethan's voice was sleepy. Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for not walking past the dumpster, for stopping, for seeing me. Rosie knelt beside his bed, took his hand. Thank you for giving me a reason to keep going, for reminding me that my heart still works, for being you. She kissed his forehead, stood to leave. Mom. Yeah. Will you stay until I fall asleep? Every night, kiddo, every night. Rosie sat in the chair beside the bed, watched Ethan's breathing even out into sleep. His hand relaxed but didn't let go of hers completely. And she sat in the dark, keeping vigil over this child who'd walked 100 miles to survive. This boy who'd chosen her. The second chance she never thought she'd get. After Ethan was fully asleep, Rosie stood, walked to the living room, stood in front of the photos on the mantel. She'd rearranged them after the hearing. Mikey's photo still there, still honored, still loved. But next to it now was Ethan's school picture from this year. Both boys smiling, both 8 when the photos were taken, both hers. Mikey, she whispered to the older photo, I want you to meet your brother. His name is Ethan Michael Brennan. He's brave and kind, and he makes terrible jokes like Uncle Hank. I think you'd like him. I think you'd be friends. She paused. I love you both so much, and I know that's okay. That my heart is big enough for both of you. That I don't have to choose between honoring your memory and building a future with Ethan. I can do both. I'm doing both. Rosie touched both photos gently. Then she went to the kitchen, made herself tea, sat at the table in the quiet apartment, her family's apartment. Tomorrow she'd wake up at 4 and open the diner. Ethan would wake up at 6 and she'd make him breakfast. He'd go to school and she'd pack his lunch with a note that said, "Love you, kiddo." He'd come home and do homework while she finished the dinner shift. They'd eat together, talk about their days, be a family, normal, ordinary, beautiful. For the first time in 20 years, Rosie was looking forward to tomorrow and the day after that. And all the days stretching ahead, not because she'd forgotten the past, but because she'd learned to carry it forward, to let grief and joy exist together, to build something new from the ruins of loss. She thought about Sharon's accusations, about codependency and unhealthy attachment and using Ethan to fill a void. Maybe there was truth in some of it. Maybe their bond was stronger because they'd both known loss. Maybe they did need each other in ways that textbooks would flag as concerning. But Rosie had learned something over these 6 months. Love wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, being honest, doing the work. And sometimes the love built on shared pain was the strongest kind, because it was forged in fire, tested by loss, proven through the hardest thing either of them had faced. She finished her tea and went to bed. Tomorrow was the first day of the rest of their lives. No more temporary placement, no more conditional custody, no more scrutiny from people who measured love in clinical terms. Just family, just home, just two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other. And that was more than enough. It was everything. In his room, Ethan Michael Brennan slept peacefully. No nightmares tonight, no fear of being moved, no anxiety about tomorrow. Just the deep, restful sleep of a child who knows he's safe, who knows he's loved, who knows he's home. And in the kitchen, 2 photos sat on the counter where Rosie would see them every morning when she made coffee. Mikey's smile frozen in time. Ethan's smile growing brighter each day. Not replacement, not forgetting. Just love expanding to hold both joy and sorrow, both past and present, both the sun she lost and the sun she found. The morning sun would rise over the Bradshaw Mountains in a few hours. Prescott would wake up. The diner would open. Life would go on in all its ordinary, extraordinary glory. And Rose Brennan, who'd spent 20 years existing rather than living, would be there to meet it. Not alone anymore. Not half alive anymore. But fully present, fully engaged, fully and completely a mother again. Because sometimes the family you find is the family you need. Sometimes the most unlikely love stories are the truest ones. And sometimes when you stop walking past the pain and start walking through it, you find exactly what you've been missing on the other side. Ethan Michael Brennan slept. His mother watched over him. And somewhere Rosie liked to think Mikey smiled too. Happy that his mother was happy. Happy that another boy got the love Mikey had known so briefly. Happy that his death had somehow impossibly led to life. And in Rosie's Roadhouse Diner in a small town in Arizona, a family built on loss and hope and fierce love began their forever.